Can you give me a prediction for when I'm talking to you this time, 2027? Where will Harry and Meghan be?
Stripped of their titles.
William plans on stripping both Harry and Meghan of their HRH titles once he becomes king.
Meghan Markle is threatening to sue the British royal family and Prince William if her titles are removed.
The king right now, his best bet would be to distance himself completely, make it clear to Harry that the Sussexes are not welcome at all in Britain for a very, very long.
There's been big changes to the royal family's official website with the removal of one of Prince Harry's title. Now, most of the royal family members have their own biography page on the royal family's official website, and this describes who exactly the royal is and what their official duties are. Now, as you can imagine, there's lots and lots of content to get through, but Prince Harry's biography still had him listed as His Royal Highness. Now, Harry actually was stripped of that honour when he and Meghan stepped back as senior working royals in 2020.
Harry could be coming back to be a working member.
That's just conspiratorial crap.
Most conversations about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle focus on titles, royal duties, or public appearances. But there is one part of the story that rarely gets explained properly, and it could completely change how people view the debate surrounding their future in the royal family. Many headlines suggest that a future monarch could simply remove Harry's titles with the stroke of a pen, making it sound like everything could disappear overnight. It is an idea that keeps resurfacing across social media and royal commentary. But the reality is far more complicated than those headlines usually admit. A recent royal decision involving Prince Andrew gave people a real example of just how much authority the monarch can exercise. After changes were made to Andrew's royal status, many commentators immediately shifted their attention to Harry, arguing that the same approach could eventually be used against him. That comparison quickly sparked another round of speculation about what could happen if Prince William one day becomes king.
They're basically manipulating their position for their own personal gain. I think this is a very serious moment for the monarchy, actually. I think, far more than Andrew or anything else, these are the people that are likely to really damage it.
Virginia Giuffre book, Prince Andrew believed it was his birthright to have sex with me. It's a horrible, horrible quote. It shows just how entitled this man really was to these things.
Imagine reading a headline that says a prince is about to lose absolutely everything. His name, his rank, his entire place in the family, practically overnight. It reads like something ripped from a courtroom drama, complete with looming verdicts and dramatic fallout. That's the mental image these stories are engineered to leave you with. And chances are, if you've spent even a little time scrolling through royal coverage lately, you've run into a version of this exact claim. Urgent sounding, alarming, and, as we're about to show you, not nearly as accurate as it seems. So let's hit pause on the panic for a minute and actually unpack how Britain's constitutional framework genuinely treats royal titles, because the reality is far less dramatic than the headlines suggest. Here at Royal Truth Desk, our whole mission is taking these unsettling tabloid claims about Harry and Meghan and picking them apart layer by layer, so you're never just reacting to an alarming word on a thumbnail without knowing what it actually means underneath. No exaggeration, no manufactured fear, just a clear-eyed explanation so you can form your own conclusions. And if that kind of channel is exactly what you're after, this is a perfect moment to subscribe and switch on notifications, because by the time this video wraps up, you'll have a firmer grasp on this subject than most of the people arguing about it online. Let's begin with the core misunderstanding fueling all of this. The assumption that a single unified system controls every aspect of Harry's royal identity, and that this one system could just wipe it all away in a single stroke. That's simply not how the machinery works. Titles, styles, peerages, and succession rights each fall under their own distinct legal frameworks, with their own mechanisms, and, in several cases, entirely separate processes for change. Bundling all of that together into one terrifying storyline might make for a compelling headline, but it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. So let's separate them out one by one, because grasping these differences is really what lets you see past the fear-driven framing. Start with succession, Harry's standing in line for the throne. That's rooted primarily in the Act of Settlement and broader constitutional law, and altering it in any real way would demand parliamentary action, not a family squabble, not a tabloid exclusive, not a hushed conversation behind palace doors. Stripping someone from the succession outright is a massive constitutional event, and it doesn't happen casually because of strained relationships or public disagreements. Looking back at history, the rare instances where someone actually lost their succession rights were tied to concrete, formal legal circumstances, not interpersonal conflict. Next, consider the peerage, his standing as Duke of Sussex. That's a hereditary title, and revoking a hereditary peerage is a historically rare and legally intricate process. It isn't something decided casually or informally. There's precedent and formal procedure attached to it, and full removal of a peerage has only ever happened under extraordinary historical conditions, not as a reaction to family disputes or lifestyle choices that made headlines. Then, entirely separately, you have royal styles and honorary designations, military roles, patronages, and the use of His Royal Highness. These are actually the most adjustable of the three categories because, unlike hereditary titles or succession law, they're largely shaped by tradition, royal discretion, and internal household decision-making rather than rigid constitutional statute. This is genuinely the area where some adjustment is realistic, and it's usually what these headlines are actually referring to when they talk about Harry losing something. Even so, any changes here tend to be far more ceremonial than substantial. Losing an honorary military role, for instance, has zero effect on his legal status, his family's standing, or his succession rights. It's a matter of appearance and formality, not a fundamental shift in who he constitutionally is. That's precisely why the way these stories get framed matters so much. A headline claiming Harry could lose everything is smashing three entirely separate legal categories together into one overblown, oversimplified claim. Sure, adjustments to honorary titles or styles are plausible and have precedent, but that's an entirely different magnitude of consequence compared to actually being removed from the succession or losing a hereditary peerage, both of which would require levels of parliamentary involvement that simply aren't realistically in play right now. So why do stories like this keep resurfacing with such urgency? Part of the answer is that Britain's constitutional structure is genuinely confusing, even to people who follow royal coverage closely. It's not exactly standard classroom material, and dense terms like peerage, precedence, letters patent and styles can sound intimidating enough that people default to the scariest possible reading without digging deeper. And honestly, part of it comes down to the same incentive we point out constantly on this channel. Fear and drama drive engagement. Harry may lose a ceremonial role in a largely symbolic move, just doesn't pull in views the way Harry could lose everything does, even though the second version dramatically overstates what's actually plausible. Here's another way to look at it. Even in cases where something does change, say a military affiliation or a ceremonial role gets adjusted, those moves are usually more about optics and internal family dynamics than any kind of formal legal punishment. The monarchy runs on symbolism and public image just as much as it runs on hard law, and tweaks to honorary titles typically reflect image management rather than any binding punitive consequence. That distinction changes the entire emotional temperature of the story. A symbolic gesture signalling institutional distance hits very differently than Harry stripped of his royal identity, even though both phrases could describe the exact same event. So where does that actually leave us? Being straightforward about it, the realistic scope of change for Harry in the foreseeable future is almost certainly confined to ceremonial and symbolic matters, honorary titles, military roles, patronages, rather than anything that touches his core legal identity as a prince, his succession standing, or his hereditary peerage. Those deeper structural pillars are protected by constitutional machinery that simply isn't built to move fast, and definitely isn't built to respond to tabloid pressure or the emotional temperature of a given news cycle. And frankly, this is a pattern that keeps repeating with Harry and Meghan coverage specifically. A story rooted in real nuance, in this case genuine legal distinctions within constitutional and honorary law, gets flattened into the most sensational version possible simply because drama outperforms nuance in the algorithm. We saw it with the financial and business allegations we covered previously, and here it is again with this succession and title story. The pattern never really changes. Take something legitimately complex, strip away the nuance, and replace it with a headline built purely to trigger a reaction, rather than actually inform anyone. None of this means there's nothing happening here, or that the topic isn't worth exploring. Quite the opposite. There are genuine ongoing conversations happening in royal and legal circles about how ceremonial roles and honorary titles should evolve going forward. But there's an enormous gap between there are ongoing discussions about symbolic honorary titles and Harry could lose everything. And that gap is exactly why we wanted to walk through this so deliberately, instead of just repeating the most sensational version of the story. So, where do you land on this? Does having a clearer picture of these legal distinctions shift how you interpret this story, or do you suspect there's more beneath the surface than what's being reported? Leave your take in the comments below. We genuinely go through them, and some of the sharpest insights on this channel come straight from you, pointing out angles we hadn't considered. Before we close things out, if this breakdown gave you some clarity, do us a favor and subscribe if you haven't yet, and flip on notifications so our videos land in your feed the moment they go live. We're going to keep pulling these headlines apart, cutting through the exaggeration and giving you the legal and constitutional context that most coverage conveniently skips. And if you're already subscribed, drop a like, pass this along to someone who's been stressing over these headlines, and tell us in the comments which royal story you want broken down next. And one last thing to hold on to: just because a headline sounds constitutional doesn't automatically make it constitutionally sound. Titles, succession and peerages live in three genuinely separate legal worlds, and blending them together is exactly how misleading headlines get built in the first place. Stay sharp, stay questioning, and we'll catch you in the next one. Royal Truth Desk. Thanks so much for watching.